Hey, everybody, this is Joe Lynn Turner, and I'm blowing up on MetalgodZradiO.
Metal Gods!
New Jersey, Hackensack. This is where Joe Lynn Turner originally comes from. Is that correct?
It's where I was born and raised, pretty much, right outside New York City.
And how long did you live there for?
Oh, geez. I moved out. I moved back. That kind of thing. But then I moved to I'd say a good 25, 27 years in Hackensack. Then I moved to New York City for a while. I was out in California for a while. I started to travel the world and live in different places here and there, 6 months, a year. But still have a house back there. And my daughter's back there with my 2 grandchildren. So I still got my sister. So I still got ties.
Nice.
And all my friends, a lot of friends, and my guitars. A lot of my guitars are there.
And Leslie West is from there, amongst other people. Is that right?
That's right. And I grew up with pretty much, I was younger than Leslie, of course, but he gave me guitar lessons. And that's how we kind of bonded many years. He was doing Mountain at the time and was one of my favorite bands. And he's still one of my favorite guitar players. And I miss him dearly because he was one of the funniest guys ever and a hell of a guitar player. And he really schooled a lot of us out there, Zach Wilde and everybody. We did the tribute album for him. And, it's sad, but we just honor him because he was an innovator.
And at what point did you stop taking guitar lessons?
Well, my dad always said, hey, if you're going to build a house, get a hammer. So you got to go get lessons. But I went to a guitar teacher in my local town and he wanted me to play all this dumb stuff, and I was reading music. I learned how to do that enough. And then I just lost interest in that and said, look, I want to play what I want to play. And Leslie showed me a lot more in technique, tone, and attitude, and that's really, I think, where the expression came from. So I think I learned a hell of a lot more from Leslie. Like once or twice a week, we would do lessons whenever he was around. And then later on in life, we jammed together and in New York at every club known to man. We just had a blast. And I did a recording on his record. He did on mine and so on and so forth.
Was a Wild Thing the first rock riff you learned, or was it Smoke on the Water?
No, actually, it was, I think, The Ventures' Wipeout. Da 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 da. That's it. And the drummer would do the drum solo.
It's awesome.
It was real popular back then. Yeah, but you're close. Those riffs are close. But believe me.
Yeah, and the new record is amazing. You must be very proud of this work.
I am. Thank you. And Peter, I was just texting him the other day. I said, look, man, we're getting great reviews. It's over the top. And he's on tour right now with Pain, but very pleased that we're getting such a positive reaction to this. We wanted to make a modern melodic metal record. And I think we absolutely achieved that. We stayed with just enough industrial metal and just enough, a lot of hard rock to sort of make a bridge between the two genres. And we did it. And I think it sounds new and fresh. And I don't hear anybody out there that's doing it. So it's also very original in a way. And it sounds like the two of us, but yet at the same time, something else completely altogether. Oh, it's our baby.
And it's a little darker than what you've worked on or what you've come up with in the past. Is that right?
A lot darker, a lot darker. Art is a reflection of life, and life is, it's a mirror of reality. And right now, the reality is pretty dark. I'm not saying it's hopeless or anything. I'm just saying, and I'm not being negative. I'm saying, look around and it's dark. Okay. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now that ain't right. And somebody's got to talk about it. After all, we were talking about the old days and rock and roll. We were rebels. We were outlaws. We were nonconformists. And it seems like a lot of people, not only people, but especially in rock and roll, have conformed and complied to a sort of lockstep where they either want to just toe the line, the corporate line, or the government line, or whatever. I mean, somebody had to come out and say it. So I think I have enough controversy on this record to wake people up. Some people will understand it. Some people won't. But that's okay, because that's what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you see things from another perspective, so that maybe your critical thinking will kick in and you'll start to realize, that our humanity and our freedoms and our dignities are being taken away from us every day. And if we don't act soon, like rise up, as the song says, if we don't do that soon, those virtues are not going to be there for us anymore. And complete compliance and enslavement is all that's there. It's truly 1984. It's truly a brave new world. It really is.
As an American, what are the most recent freedoms you feel that you've lost?
Well, speech, number one. Number one, freedom of speech is really, they all keep talking about a democracy. But first of all, the United States is a constitutional republic. Secondly, democracy, which the Greeks invented, has never really worked. There's always been some social aspects to democracy. But talking about democracy and censoring speech, it's complete hypocrisy, okay? Because freedom of speech is the number one thing that you need in a democracy. Freedom of choice, too. Elections are pretty dodgy lately, okay? Because there seems to be, in my day, there was an election day, not an election month. It's all falling apart, man. And, we don't vote. The Congress didn't vote for all this stuff. There's a lot wrong, in my opinion, that's going on in the United States right now. And I have the right, we all have the right to speak about it. I went to Iraq for over a month with a band called Big Noise, which had a few notables, like, we had Simon Wright from AC/DC, and we had Phil Soussan, from Ozzy's band, and various other bands right now from Last in Line, and Carlos Cavasso from Quiet Riot. And we saw things there and learned things that I don't think the average American or anyone really would learn about what the situation there. There were no WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. That was all a big lie, a big hoax, and so on. So I think what's happening here is that our critical thinking has been lost somewhere in the mix. And everybody just sort of, instead of thinking for yourself what comes on that TV, which could be easily fake news, really it could, you should question everything that's been said to you. You should question every decision that they've made and really try to dig deeper. Instead of making a conclusion that that's the truth, you should seek for the truth instead. And I think you'll find that the man behind the curtain is not who you think he is, as in the Wizard of Oz. That's what we're doing there. It's all mirrors, smoke and mirrors. So looking deeply into this, as I have for years, and educating myself, which I think we as Americans should do more of instead of watching Netflix. I got a bitch about it, really, because I think people need to wake up and take their life back, take their country back. You're losing it. It's my father fought in 2 wars for this, and he'd be turning over in his grave right now.
Who came up with your stage name?
I had a friend named Richard Mason Blakemore, who we call Ricky Blakemore. Then I ended up playing with a guy named Richie Blackmore. Everybody thought he was Ricky Blakemore, was Richie Blackmore, but that's just the synchronicity of life, okay? And Ricky Blakemore came up with my name when we were in Fandango together, because he said, "Hey, your Italian name, Joe Lynn Turner, it's not going to make it." He goes, "You go down south of the U.S." He says, where he's from. He was a Southern boy. He said, "They'll tar and feather you." So he said, "I got a cousin named Johnny Lynn Payne." He says, "You're Joe Lynn Turner, and you like the blues like Big Joe Turner, so you could be Joe Lynn Turner." And we went up to RCA offices to sign a contract for Fandango for 4 records. And when they asked everybody's name, he turned around quickly and said, "That's Joe Lynn Turner." And they went, "Great name." And I looked at him and I went, "Okay, I'll play." I guess it's like the line in the Steely Dan song, how the pros change their name. So I became Joe Lynn Turner. And a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So it's all in the name.
And Fandango, once again, was your first band, putting out 4 full lengths in the late 70s. That must have been quite a ride. Talk about being in the industry at that time, a little bit about the excess you participated in and witnessed, and some of the idols, some of the bands you played with, and some of the idols you might have met and partied with and whatnot.
You better believe all of that. Everything you just mentioned is absolutely true. 4 albums. I mean, we had some support from the record company, but in those days, at least, they were giving out decent contracts, decent size advances and things like that. But we had a pretty shady manager who took all our publishing. We didn't know any better. We were kids. So this is old rock and roll stories, happens to a lot of people, and it's still happening to people. We played so many festivals and things on the cowboy circuit, we called it, but we played with the Outlaws and Allman Brothers and Billy Joel and Jethro Tull and Chicago, and I can go on and on and on with the bands. Dixie Dregs, and oh man, there were so many. Charlie Daniels, you name it. And whatever. Well, that's where we got our equipment stolen in Chicago at Chicago Fest. They took the whole truck, these guys from Canada, and they stole $80,000 back then. $80,000 was like over $160,000 now, believe me. And that kind of took the wind out of Fandango's sails. But yes, we partied with some crazy stuff, man. Really partied heavy with some crazy people. You meet a lot of people in this business, up and down. And yes, a lot of legends as well, from Rod Stewart to you name it. I mean, David Bowie, hung out with him for quite a while in LA. I can go on and on. I mean, I don't want to drop names, but hell of an experience, really. And you learn who you are and who not to be. And I think that's important and imperative for anybody on the way up, or even as we're here. You want to be a decent person after it all, I think, because you'll come to a realization sooner or later in your life of what you've done and what you haven't done. And after that, it's all up in it's beyond our judgment. That's for sure.
You said you mentioned Rod Stewart and David Bowie. Are those 2 artists that you got to get together with and really break the bread with?
Well, yeah, breaking bread. We used to play soccer against Stewart because he's a big soccer player, and Richie's a big soccer player. And we'd cross paths on the road sometimes. I think we had 3 or 4 games. Then we'd have some pints afterwards and, eat a meal or whatever. And his band, my band, I played chess with Sting on a bullet train in Tokyo, from Tokyo to Osaka. Nobody wanted to play him because he's so good. So I just took the loss, of course. But that was a hoot. And of course, Bowie, we met at a party, and next thing I knew, we were hanging out, with chicks and stuff like that. It was just simple rock and roll fare with him and Earl Slick and a whole bunch of guys, Carlos, Carmine Rojas, everybody. We had a blast. Those were the days. The days now can't even compare to those days. Especially the 80s. I'm just very fortunate that I was part of that whole scene. You know, when MTV started to come up and the bands came up so original and so great sounding, you know. And now I think there's too much corporate cookie cutter sound, which I think, again, Belly of the Beast separates us from that big time. So that's what I'm most proud of, is that we have we have a familiar sounding but yet new and original album, and that's the important thing, to do some art as opposed to just some copy.
I still have an RCA sampler 45 of Fandango, Scorpions, and Aztec two-step. I think.
Oh, Aztec two-step. I remember this. Oh my God, you have that?
I still have it, and I looked it up on eBay. It's like worth $10 or something like that.
Yeah. But I mean, it's really it's not worth money. It's just collectors, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the other one was Bill Quaitman or something like that. But
Quaitman, I remember him. Yes. See, whatever happened to Bill?
How do you remember Bill? Did you cross paths with any of the artists on the sampler?
Sure, but not like, I wouldn't say like we were best friends or anything, but
right.
But of course we crossed paths, and we knew people that were still on the label there, and some people came up and some people went down.
Yeah.
And some people are still around, and some people have gone on to greener pastures. But sure, who was one? Robert Gordon. That's a name flashback, right? Geez, there were so many. I mean, that was the Elvis label, man. RCA.
Yeah.
We called it the Recording Cemetery of America.
Where people go to die, where careers go to die, right?
Where careers go to die, right? That's what you say.
Now, I imagine you have quite a collection of your own. What is your most prized music collectible?
I think maybe Led Zeppelin, the original Led Zeppelin, all of the Led Zeppelin's original pressings, stuff like that. But I have Cream, and, I'm going from the 60s, Doors. When you pull out these vinyls, it's just, crazy, because I kept them in pretty good shape. But you lend them to your friends back then, because who knew, right? Well, sometimes they'd be scratches, and they'd be rolling their pot or something, or cutting lines of cocaine on your album cover. See scratches in it, but still, it doesn't matter, man, because the music is still in there. It's still some killer stuff. Yeah, I got some really odd stuff too. Captain Beefheart, Captain Beefheart, and the Gonzo Dog Band. I mean, bands you wouldn't even hear about anymore. But were pretty fashionable at the time. Nice.
Now, you went from Fandango, doing your own thing, to joining Rainbow, and then it was almost 2 decades of being in other people's bands. How difficult was that, compromising and such?
Well, other people's bands, but I was writing the songs, co-writing. So it was as much as maybe Richie was the leader of the band. It was his band, no doubt about it, with all respect. But I was a big part of that. Good or bad, I was a big part of that. So I had my outlet as far as creativity, and freedom to be me, and what we were going after at the time, which was basically more commerciality, so that we could get some chart success, especially with MTV and everything else that came out. Most people don't realize that even with Ingve, I was called in by Polygram specifically to get him a radio hit. And that's where Having Tonight came from, and a few other things. But we still kept integrity. See, that's the important thing, I think, with whether either Rainbow or Ingve or anybody I work with. I try to keep the integrity of the band. We had our Eyes of Fire with Rainbow. We had our, deep cuts. And yet we had our commercial cuts. So, and it was the same with Ingve. So there was a nice balance of both, really. And I think that's a skill and a craft that you have to develop. And fortunately, I had enough experience to do that as a writer and singer.
Do you recall? I'm sorry.
So it was their band, but I had a big stamp on it.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Definitely. This is definitely a good thing. Do you recall what led you to choose Deep Purple over Bad Company and Foreigner?
Yeah, I was really familiar with Richie and Roger, and Deep Purple was like one of my favorite bands, and still is of all time. I mean, I just used to put those like Machine Head. I got the original vinyl on that, that kind of stuff. I've got all the albums, but I felt more comfortable personally with them. But it was tough because the bluesy side of me really wanted to go with Bad Co. But then that was an iffy situation, because you don't know who. I mean, with Foreigner, for example, Bud Frager, rest his soul, the Silver Fox, as they called him, he was an arrogant manager, and I was sick of arrogant managers. And, that's kind of like what I told him that one night. And Rick Wills called me up and said, look, Bud doesn't really like you because of what, you talk back. And I said, well, that's too fucking bad. And, right? I mean, that's it. It's on my lung, it's on my tongue. And I said, it's too bad because I didn't start it. I didn't talk to him. He said, I know. So I said, so what's the deal? So he said, look, Lou's coming back anyway. He knew you were here, but he was on his way back anyway. Him and Nick trying to iron out stuff. So unfortunate that I digress a bit, but out of that, relationship with Mick Jones, I did his solo album, and I also was on the Stormfront with Billy Joel, and I did a couple of videos with Billy Joel, was on a David Letterman show, blah, blah, blah. So that expanded. Now a couple of my guys like Dave Rosenthal and Chuck Berge have been with Billy Joel for 20 years. So they're still playing the Garden and what have you. So a lot of things came out of it, but it was easier for me to relate to Richie and Roger. So I went up to Vermont and did the so-called audition and got the job right there because I was a good writer as well as a singer. And I think that's something that a lot of people really overlook with me is that, I'm just judged as a singer all the time, but really I'm a writer. And that's very important, in this business. In fact, there's a lot of writers out there who never become famous, but they're doing quite well. Publishing.
And an accomplished accordion player.
Oh man, that story is great. When I was young, being from Italian heritage, my parents got me a little mini Galente, which was a mini accordion, and because my hands were small and trying to play that thing. And I learned to play it, but as soon as the Beatles came out, my father brought home a guitar. And the accordion isn't a very sexy instrument. And if you want to impress girls, at that age, you pick up the guitar and you try to be Elvis or the Beatles. Well, that's where I went, but it was funny. But yeah, my whole background, my Italian family, my grandfather played a concertina, which is very much like an accordion. My uncle Pasquale taught me guitar, and everybody sang and everybody played, and it was a very musical family type of. There was always music going on in my house. My father was a great singer, not professionally, but he sang in the military with the USO shows and things like that. So that's how I grew up. But yeah, the accordion, I'm famous for that.
How similar are Richie Blackmore and Yngwie Malmsteen to each other?
They're really, both geniuses on their instruments. I think I have to say, in my opinion, they're maestros. They really are, but different. Their attitudes are also different. Whereas Richie really played for the song. The song was very important to Richie. Melody was very important to Richie. If he liked the melody, then you've had a song. If the melody wasn't there, no matter how hard it was driving, even in a hard driving song, he wanted melody, he wanted reason. And And whereas Malmsteen was just more interested, I think, with solos, and was giving me all kinds of hell for, making him a hit, which I never understood because, more or less I put him on a map with Odyssey, and when I say it's because I also was very instrumental in the hospital problem that he had when he had gotten a coma from that car accident. And I took care of that whole thing. I was the elder that was there. And I was the one that was calling Polygram and getting the wire transfers to keep him in a good hospital at Northridge, as opposed to going down to county where another shyster manager wanted him to go. And I said, no way, he'll die down there. And he would have. Northridge was an excellent hospital, but they needed money. And this manager, Andy Truman, who used to manage the Bay City Rollers, he was a creep and typical rock manager. He was stealing from Yngwie, and I was involved with a 24-hour security because this guy was peddling cocaine, and he had a 44 Magnum, and it was a dangerous type of guy. It's a long story there, but getting back to the music, I think Yngwie really wanted, to make sure that he had this, some sort of typically heavy record, but he did. He had a heavy melodic record. There's still integrity on that record. Ride in the Dungeons, Deja Vu, Crystal Ball. I mean, these are great songs. These are some of his fans' favorite songs. So, so varied like that, it was a big difference in how to do. Excuse
me. Would you say with Yngwie, you were the adult in the room?
Oh, yes, I was. At that time, I was, yes. Because the Johansson brothers, brilliant. I love them to this day. They're still great friends. I see them often. But they were new to the country. And so was Yngwie in a way. I mean, he played in Alcatraz and stuff. But still, nobody was responsible enough to do what I was doing with the, as I say, the financials that had to go from hospital, from Polygram, directly wire transferred to the accounts in the hospital and so on and so forth. And also getting them an apartment, and checking out the situation with Yngwie's leased Ferrari and leased house, which he thought he owned, but the manager was really just soaking up all the advances, taking all the money, and just leasing the stuff for him. And that was quite a scene. That was really something, man, because we finally got out of that problem. And this manager, Andy Truman, his wife cleaned him out, backed up a truck one day to the Congo and cleaned him out. And I think he went looking for her. That's the last we ever saw him. Crazy stuff, man.
Crazy stuff. Well, I think we're probably running out of time. I know you have other interviews to do. Just a few more questions.
Sure.
Let's talk about baldness. I started losing my hair when I was 18, about 4 years after you started to lose yours. I know that kids are cruel. I came from England, so I had a funny accent. My mom used to make my clothes, and I had a big head. And then, so I'm no stranger to abuse from other kids. Yes. You went through the ringer on that as well, and obviously probably as an adult, being in the rock scene. Oh yeah. I know I played in bands in the 80s. I would sit in the room when Cy Sperling would come on the TV. You probably remember that name, right?
Cy Sperling with yeah.
Not only a member, but
what was it, men's club or something? The men.
That's right.
The hair club.
The hair club for men.
Yeah, hair club for men. That's it. Cy Sperling. Yeah, of course. So then you know the ostracization that happens with that kind of shit. Really, you do. You can feel it. So I really, there's some anger that we get mixed in with, right?
Yeah.
We're hurt. We're angry.
Right.
Which it's beyond our control. It's not like we want it.
No.
We didn't ask for it. And whether it's romantically or professionally or just hanging with a group of kids.
Yeah.
They think, it was really tough. So I just used the motivation to try to beat them all. That's all I could do, is get where I wanted to go.
Done that.
Yeah, I did. I think I have the last laugh. And it's my 20th high school reunion. I remember saying I didn't really want to attend it. So anyway, I pull up in this limousine and I take my turn at the podium and I say, I want to thank all of you for making fun of me. I want to thank you, Mary Lou, for breaking my heart, because I went on to sell 10 million records at this point. At that point, I had sold 10 million. This certainly surpassed that. But I said, and I've got a great wife and a place and all this, and I found love. And I said, so good luck to all of you, but I'm out of here. And I walked right out of that party, and they were all, their mouths dropped, because I just was like, and all the freaks, all the freaky kids, the creepy kids that they didn't like, became very successful. One guy owned the radios, a couple of radio stations and networks. Another guy was like a scientist, and so on. And it was really great to see that these football players are now like garbage men,
Well, thank you for your time. Have a great day.
Hey, thank you, Milo. I really appreciate it. I really do, brother. I hope to see you
again soon.
You got it. Later.
Yeah.